I can go up to 4 streams. So, like, if you wanted to start your own YouTube, we could also be simulcasting to both of our channels at the same time.
Really?
Yeah. As long, yeah. I just I have a cute little this StreamYard thing that I use. It allows me I can simulcast up to 4 destinations. We're live, and so everyone can hear me talking about this, but no one's here yet, so it doesn't really super matter.
That's fine. And this is actually the same platform that John Dehlin used on Sunday night. I was like, this is a fancy schmancy platform.
It's a swanky platform. And there's a free version that works just well. I'm on the middle platform, and then you can go and get a more expensive one, but I have yet to need that. Yet to need it. And I can do up to, as you learned with the John Dehlin thing, I can do up to 10 people. So if ever we wanted to make this a big round robin, we could do that.
I would love to have Obi on here.
Oh my gosh, that'd be awesome.
Obi's amazing.
He is. They are, yeah.
And I know that are their pronouns they?
They, yes.
Oh my goodness, I have been so out of the loop for all these reasons. So
yep.
I know that they were reading your book, so it might be fascinating.
It would. No, like I said, I'd be interested. Here we go. So Brian Marlett came on. Hello, Obi is the man.
He is.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yep. Can you see in your view, can you see the comments?
Yes, I can.
Cool. I know that the first week I didn't have that turned on correctly. So awesome. We are just to kick it off now that we've been on live for like 3 minutes. We are just kicking off where we always do. We're going to pick a chapter of my book to start the conversation and then just go wildly off topic and talk about whatever strikes our fancy. Hi. I will say, in the world of just gross self-promotion, that the audiobook does come out this Friday. And it's been a labor of love. It's a lot harder to read your own book. Actually, it's a lot harder to read out loud than you think it is until you record it and listen back to it. You're like, gosh, I sound like an idiot. So that having been said, book posts Friday, and I'm running a promotion right now that anybody who buys the paperback from my website and uses, anyone who buys before Friday, before it is available, anyone who buys my the paperback from verybestbadidea.com, I will give the audiobook for free, just to kind of get the audiobook out there and get more sales kind of going and people talking about it. So like MG ordered one this morning, so the book will go out tomorrow and she will get the audiobook Friday.
So can I do something really weird and film a really quick TikTok video of us going live?
Absolutely.
So post it, because I didn't post.
And I forgot to as well. So I'm terrible at this. Good thing I don't own a marketing company. That'd be embarrassing.
Hey guys, I am live with Kirk the Creative right now. Pay no attention to my mess. Oh, wave, Kirk.
Hi.
Come and join us. I think we're even on his Facebook, right?
Facebook page, Very Best Bad Idea, and YouTube/Release the Creative.
YouTube/Release the Creative, and there you can comment and we can discuss, and it'll be great. So join us.
Exactly.
Now you guys all saw my super complicated process. And
now, just to keep this super meta, when you post that, I'm going to go on Duet It. And this is just meta all over the place. Just going to wait for that to pop up.
Let me do some tagging. Got to do the tagging.
Awesome. I just found out another this week of promoting the book is actually doing fairly well, as I've sold several copies this week, which it's been nice. What was that face?
My phone decided to automatically play some TikTok videos, and it was pretty loud.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Just like it decided to automatically play me just now. All right.
Now let me look for you so I can pull.
We're super organized here. Like we're
it's true. And we're going to duet this. Hold on. We are indeed live. Here we go. So anyway, I'm going to let that play through. and then I'm going to post it. Okay, yes, Brian. So so the book is The Very Best Bad Idea. It is about creativity, cognition, and communications, which is an interesting way of saying it's about it starts off. Hold on one second, and posting. There's my daughter. Anyway, so it starts off talking about the history of thinking and the history of conformity, why we as a species give a damn what other people think, and why we will actually act against our own self-interest more often than not. After we establish that baseline, I interviewed a bunch of neurologists, psychologists, historians, people of that nature to kind of back that up. It then goes into how to break free of that and how to embrace your own best ideas, how to be more comfortable with your originality and nonconformity, and how to just, I mean, to use the phrase, it's about living your best life and embracing your own very best bad ideas, things that really move you and you're really excited about, but everyone else doesn't seem to get. And yeah, conducted over 100 interviews, interviewed everyone from university philosophy departments through neurologists, through just kind of everything, and had a great time of it for about 1.5 years. And then this is the result of that research. So this chapter, we're talking chapter 2 today, which I believe is called Change Your Mind. Yes, I believe.
Correct. You have passed the test.
Yeah, Change Your Mind. This is the one that actually I did. I started studying philosophy on this one because I was like, if I'm going to write a book about the way people think, I should probably talk about philosophy. Like, that feels a little on the nose, but I'm going to go for it. And so I started calling people around and asking about, hey, tell me about philosophers and tell me about philosophy and tell me about people who have shaped our world. And how this chapter started is every single person I asked said Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, almost always first. Those were the first 3. And then they'd go off and they'd say 100 different other people. They'd say, I got such a weird list of people, to include Bob Marley, which I talk about in the book. But everyone, literally 100%, said Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. And that got me curious. So I started asking follow-up questions when I'd follow back up with these people. And almost none of them could tell me anything about these individuals. They could tell me that they were from Greece, and that is it. They couldn't tell me if they lived at the same time. They couldn't tell me if they were contemporaries, of which they kind of were. They were successive. They couldn't tell me what their actual contributions. People were a little bit more on Plato. They're like, oh, Plato, he wrote that book, that one. But I mean, people really couldn't get into it. And I thought that was fascinating, that people knew these people shaped our culture, but they couldn't tell me why. So you studying history, though, I would have you seen a lot of that? People that your professors talk about, or people that are influential historians, or people in history, but everyone's heard the name but can't tell you much about them.
Oh yeah. So actually, I loved this chapter, and I read it a few weeks ago. But then the week before spring vacation, I did study Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato in my Western civilization class. And I thought it was hilarious because of this chapter. So
I'm glad.
What I find actually really interesting is it's not just people that people today will reference and then have no idea who they are, like no idea what they did. Sure. But it's also things like movements. Like how often do we use the term cynic, or someone is a cynic, and we don't know who the cynics were? You don't know who the cynics were either?
Until this moment, I didn't realize that I didn't realize that a cynic was a movement or a type of person. I just thought cynic meant someone who was cynical. I'm embarrassed. No.
Well, don't be embarrassed, because honestly, I didn't know as much about it as I thought I did. So in part of my Western civilization class, we talked about the philosophers, but we also talked about Greek philosophy, which includes Stoicism and Cynicism. And the cynics were people who are incredibly on the nose. They were people who, were cynics of society, of spirituality, of all the practices, but they went a step further and they were really in your face about it. So like once the main guy, I cannot remember his name, something Achilles, I'm sure, he went and took a big dump in the middle of like a market or something in public somewhere. Okay. And sort of like public disobedience that they did. They did a lot of displays of disobedience in order to show that it was all meaningless. Everything was meaningless. All of these ideas, the structures that we've created in society, they're meaningless. So I found that incredibly fascinating.
That is. Hold on. Sorry, my computer is deciding to be weird today. There we go. No, I didn't. What era? When was that? When and where was that?
It was in the Hellenistic Greek period, I believe. Okay. And it was around the time of Sophocles, Aristotle, and Plato.
Socrates or Sophocles?
Socrates.
Okay. Just making sure. Because I know, yeah. I remember not too long ago learning that a Luddite was like, I'd used the term Luddite for much of my life, but didn't know that it had anything to do with the advent of looms and other, yeah. Go ahead. Say what you're about to say.
Well, pleb came up as well.
Yeah.
Pleb came up in the ancient Greece and Hellenistic Greece and whatever study. And I found that super interesting because I use that just to sound pretentious. Like I'm using it ironically to be funny because, you know, the hipster guys are like, oh, you're a pleb.
Right.
So like I'll use it. And yeah, I found it really interesting.
Now, here's what's amazing to me is that, you know, anyone who's talked to me for more than 14 seconds knows that I love words. I love vocabulary and I love turns of phrase. And it was writing this. It was 2 years ago now. Now, the Socratic method I had always understood was tied to Socrates. That was not lost on me at all. However, what absolutely was lost on me, and I had never connected that platonic love is related to Plato. Like that connection that, you know, to love a person platonically was as Plato described. Like, and that's just cool. I don't know why I find it so cool, but I also don't know how I missed it because it's relatively obvious once you see it. But yeah,
I love words too. Etymology, not to be confused with entomology.
Not at all. No, very different. Very different. Okay, so like I said, so I interview 100 people, 103, and I tried to make sure that they were spread, men, women, you know, all over North America, specifically the U.S. and Canada. I think I did 1 or 2 people were in England, but for the most part, it was largely North America, and it was amazing to me that no matter how deep the rabbit hole I went, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, they all mentioned them. But it didn't matter if they also happened to mention Kierkegaard or you know, Immanuel Kant or whoever. It didn't matter who they mentioned. They couldn't tell me why. Like they thought they could. They're like, oh, I love Ayn Rand. You know, she wrote, you know, Atlas Shrugged. Cool. Have you read it? Well, no. What's it about? It's really important. It's about the fall of communism. Is it? Like, that is so barely correct. I mean, it's adjacently correct. Like, you're not wrong. Can you tell me anything she said? No. And again, it didn't matter who they said. There was a few exceptions to this, which I go into. The people that used more contemporary examples like Noam Chomsky, people that included him could tell you why, because again, he's alive currently. People that used more contemporary examples tended to be able to cite a little bit more, but all these people, if it was pre-World War II, nothing. They could tell you these names. They could tell you they were influential. They might be able to tell you, you know, existentialism. They might be able to tie it to a field, but that's it. And I found that fascinating that these people had been ingrained into our culture, into our society, into our education, but not what they did. I'm trying to turn that into a question because I know you'll have insights there. I know that you have seen and experienced this.
Well, I can make a statement real quick.
Please do that.
To read Atlas Shrugged is to stop liking Ayn Rand.
Okay. I will say that I've read Anthem twice. Anthem is really great because by the time you get to the end of the like 114 pages, it's very short. It almost convinces you that it's not crazy. By the time you get to the end, you're like, oh my gosh, I so agree. Communism bad, capitalism good. Like, and then you think about it for a few days and you're like, wait, no. Like, it's a really good I genuinely appreciate the point she's making, but I think that when you read the rest of the things that she did say and do, she took it a little bit too far to the other side of the pendulum. Yeah. I have not read Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead. I've not read either of her big books. I've read Anthem.
So I've heard The Fountainhead is actually the best one, is what I've heard. I've never read all of Atlas Shrugged. I did read John What's His Butt's monologue, which is like 15 pages long. That's not me over exaggerating. In Atlas Shrugged, my husband, he drives around a lot for his job, so he likes to listen to audiobooks. He said that listening to Atlas Shrugged was the worst thing he's ever done in his life. It was the worst 4 days. He just wanted it to be over.
Oh gosh.
So badly. But he wanted to read it or listen to it so that he could say, yes, I have read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, every once in a while I will get an Audible book. I was like, oh, this sounds really great. And I'm a completionist. I don't quit. So I will get like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours into a book. And I'm like, oh gosh, what have I done? Like make it stop. But it's, yeah, there's been some.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say that when I was reading the list of people that people mentioned, and I've referenced Machiavelli so many times in our personal conversations last week that I was realizing that would probably be my pick.
I don't think he made the list in the book, but I know that he made the list that people mentioned.
He did. He's in the book.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, whoever said Voltaire, I just imagine that they have the driest, darkest sense of humor, and I want to meet this person.
No, for the record, the one who mentioned Charles Dodson was by far the driest. Because Charles Dodson was a mathematician whose pen name was Lewis Carroll. Mm-hmm. And so but anyone who doesn't say Lewis Carroll, but references the mathematician Charles Dodson, I was like, man, you are a special kind of nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, you have taken nerd to the next level. But no, he and I had a wonderful conversation about Charles Dodson. I learned a lot. I did not realize that Alice in Wonderland was a socio-political statement about new math. And and they walked me through some of the turns of phrase they were literally, dog whistles and eye winks at mathematicians. And I'm like you must keep your temper is a geometry statement of the time that I didn't realize. There was so much I learned about, what's so great about this book is 1/100th of the stuff I learned made it into the book because you just couldn't contextualize everything. Yeah. But yeah, I learned a lot about Charles Dodson. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I love Alice in Wonderland, actually. We've talked about this before. Maggie Babylon. My younger girls read it recently, and having them do logic with it. So having them do a accompanying book about logic based on Alice in Wonderland.
Sure.
Because it's so good to really think about logic and logical fallacies with.
Right.
And it's interesting because most people focus on Alice. They focus on the character of Alice. Who was she? Was she Alice Little? Was she, and then some people have theorized that Lewis Carroll had a Lolita sort of thing.
Yeah. That's a very popular reading into his personal proclivities. My
point being that it's way more interesting than math. So not a lot of people really care about the math part.
You're like, this is my treatise on a normal, rational girl entering into the new and changing world of math. You're like, I'm sorry, I said what? It's so insane when you find out what he was really doing. And it's so much fantasy. And I really, we talked about this a few weeks ago. I don't want to degrade Lewis Carroll down to just fantasy. I think that there is more going on there. But generally, all fantasy is some degree a social commentary. And so when you go back, we talked about Tolkien, he was a linguist, which is why there's so much culture and language throughout his. And Charles Dodson, Lewis Carroll was a mathematician, which is why there's so much about logical fallacies and non-parallels, parallels and adjacents and things that are supposed to line up, but don't, and things getting bigger and smaller. And it's really interesting. Tolkien is fantasy for linguists, and Charles Dodson, Lewis Carroll, is fantasy for, logisticians. And fascinating. No, that was all I was saying. It's fascinating.
I would actually make it broader. I would say that Tolkien is fantasy for humanities nerds, and Carol is fantasy for STEM nerds.
STEM nerds. I'll take that. No, that makes sense. I buy that, because you're right. I mean, there's so much in Tolkien, which I've told you I'm not a fan of. I'm not like pretending to be, but yeah, it is absolutely. It's very humanities based. It's very cultural and world building, whereas Lewis Carroll's very world deconstructing. He doesn't build a world; he tears it apart. I mean, the Jabberwocky. I mean, it's all about absurdity, and that was his take on the route math was taking, which is odd because I can't like. Past arithmetic, I'm out. And even some arithmetic, I'm out.
Yeah, I just ignore the fact that it's about math whenever I read it.
Yeah. So tell me from you, I mean, like we get a little bit into this in the book, but like, why is it that we can name Voltaire and Socrates, but we have no idea who made the Great Pyramids? We're talking about a culture that wrote everything down, and we don't know. We don't know. Like, we know who made the Great Wall of China. We know what dynasty and stuff like that. But that's not something, unless you are a humanities major, unless you are a anthropologist with that as your, that's not a name people know. They can all tell you a half a dozen philosophers. But when we get into the aqueducts of Rome, when we get it, outside of people that specialize in that anthropology, we don't know the people that did these massive, monolithic, still present things. And why is that? We
idolize power. And these people creating these things wasn't power. The people who were wielding them or using them were using them for power. So
right. But I mean, that's my point though. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they weren't powerful. I mean, one of them was Socrates was executed for speaking out against the leadership of the time. I can't tell you which Caesar made the aqueducts. I can say Caesar because that's just the catch-all of all Romans. I'm pretty sure it was Caesar. I don't know which. I don't know which dynasty made the Great Wall, and I know these things. I love these things. They are power. They're still there. They were made with great power. These people were like writing their name on the bathroom wall of the earth, and it's still there. But we don't know their names. But 3 semi-unimportant Greek guys from 3,000 years ago, oh yeah, no, everyone knows them.
I think that they weren't semi-unimportant though, because okay, I believe it was Socrates, but I could be wrong. It's one of the 3 actually. Oh gosh, what is the word? Taught Alexander the Great.
Oh, and that's pre-Socrates. It's the 7 great. Shoot, I learned about this when writing the book. Yes, it's just before Socrates. Yes.
And then the Socratic method is something that we still use today, and I believe Plato was the one that made the university.
Correct. Plato. Yes, Plato founded what is considered to be the first university. Yes.
So these are things that we still utilize today. Aqueducts, it's like asking who invented the idea of, the Pony Express. Like we don't use fire. Right. But it's impressive.
Are you telling me that who invented plumbing isn't something that concerns you? Like, come on.
Well, that was Mario.
Oh. No, that's true. I stand corrected on that one. So it's interesting. So the major contributions of the 3 guys, and I get into this a little bit more, but is yes, Socrates invented teaching, and that's obviously not true. I'm being remarkably glib and overstating, but Socrates invented teaching someone by asking questions instead of giving them information, because before that it was always about like, I decree it, now you know it, we're good. Socrates invented asking questions, which is a little ridiculous, but that's what the Socratic method is getting you to learn by forcing you to think it through. Plato then his student wrote down everything he said, invented is a strong, basically invented the first university. Alfred North Whitehead, a more contemporary historian and philosopher, said that all of Western culture is more or less a series of footnotes to Plato. And whereas that's remarkably glib and sounds a little dismissive, it's also super true. So much of our culture and the way that Western culture thinks and acts is in the dialects and the discussions of Plato.
And concerning that, we have to remember that if Plato is like the founder, whatever, of much of Western civilization, you get what I'm saying here.
I do, yeah.
Then Aristotle was his father and Socrates his grandfather.
It's right.
Dynasty. Like no,
I like to think of it, again, I'm a nerd. I like to think of it as the Qui-Gon, it's the Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin. It's and then what's really interesting about Aristotle, and what I personally think Aristotle's contributions were, if I was there at the time hanging out with those three guys, I'm pretty sure that Aristotle and I are the one that would have gotten along the most. Because what Aristotle did was, before Aristotle, you couldn't think outside the box because there wasn't a box. He's the one who came into the Greeks on the stairs and said, you're talking about math, you're talking about biology, you're talking about botany, you're talking about, and they're like, no, we're just all talking about the earth. And he's like, no, you don't understand. He's the one who literally drew the boundaries around what was music, what was theater, and how were music and theater different? What was math and what was science and how were they different? He was the one who defined and separated out these different categories. And in a lot of ways, he was one of the first people, he was some of the first people, he was the first one to do necropsies and start going like dissecting animals to like figure out different things that people hadn't really, outside of the butcher, people hadn't cared about how the inner things worked. Aristotle, we can only think outside the box because Aristotle made the box. And these three guys, they absolutely invented the way that we think. Today, people are still asking questions and posing the same thought experiments that these three men posed literally thousands of years ago.
Yes. The thing is that it didn't happen in a vacuum.
Oh, absolutely not.
So like Mesopotamia had already more or less separated those fields, and that was thousands of years before these three men. But it's interesting how so many people think, and I'm not accusing you of this, I'm just saying in general, so many people think that we were just minding our business and boom, this sprouted up. And it's like, well, actually, there's a lot of context. There's a lot of like, we were doing this for a long time. And then these people came and they reformed the ideas into what we still use today. So that's where we trace it back to. So that's what's important to us.
Well, no, and absolutely. And that's the thing about incremental innovation. I talk about this, we'll get into this in a later conversation, but in the world, there are remarkably few, for the record, I can only think of one, but there are remarkably few cardinal inventions that cannot be ascribed to nature. And by cardinal invention, so what do I mean? Flight, we have this planes, birds, we can see those, skyscrapers, we understand the concept of climbing a tree. Like so many of the things we can attribute to, like, hey, look, this is something that we saw, we observed, we created. There are very few things that humans have actually added, once again, once you start getting into science, to like actual electronics and technology, but even electricity that was observed and then harnessed. One of the only things that we didn't discover, but we created, what we added to the world, is the wheel.
Oh, okay. I was going to say the Oreo.
Which is a wheel. No, I'm about it. Because the wheel, nothing on Earth rolls. And so many people have loved you, like, what are you about? Like the roly-poly rolls or the armadillo? No, there were balls, there were circles.
There's spheres. Yes, rocks would roll down hills and logs would fall down, but nothing in the animal or natural universe uses a fixed point axle and a spinning disc or sphere to propel any kind of motion. That is something that is absolutely not done in the animal kingdom. And ironically, it's not what we invented it for either. We invented the wheel for pottery because we got tired of spinning the disc while we were making the pot. The idea was this made spinning the pot easier. And I have it in the book. I don't remember that. It was like 200 years of pottery before we thought, if we put this on the ground, we could move faster. So you're saying that a woman invented the wheel?
Yes, I guess that is what I'm saying. I mean, I guess I don't know yes, that tracks. Very, very possible. You know,
and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a man who was finally walking by and paying attention to what a woman was doing and was like, we could put that on the ground.
So what you're saying is, hold on. So women invented the wheel and men invented sick rims. That totally tracks.
Right.
Everything about that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah. It's the first, when there's a lot of kind of disagreements about where the wheel first popped up, but they all pretty much circle around about 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, which is easy to say because Mesopotamia in 3500 BCE was kind of the known world. Like it was it was big.
Yeah, what's really interesting about Mesopotamia is that it's also, it's like the seat of civilization, the cradle, there we go, of civilization.
Absolutely.
And likely because of the Fertile Crescent and literally the fertile land that was around there that allowed for agriculture. But the fascinating thing is that agriculture sprung up at the same exact time in China.
Yep.
And it's like, that's so fascinating to me. There's so many things in history that are like that are fascinating. Well, and without any known interaction, did we come to the same conclusions at the same time?
And I'm going to butcher this study, so I actually don't want to dig too deep into it because like I said, I'm going to butcher. But they've I was just reading this study, so I wish I had it more top of mind. But they were doing a study of monkeys that were not that were adjacent but not connected in any way, that had no interaction, and they were noticing behavioral shifts over the generations of monkeys. And they were finding, like, if you introduced a new behavior or watched a new behavior get introduced, you could see that same behavior introduced in other tribes of monkeys that had no connection to each other. It's the same thing, is you'd see spontaneous development across disparate groups. The one that I reference all the time, hashtag Leibniz, Team Leibniz, is that Isaac Newton and Wilhelm Leibniz invented calculus simultaneously 100 miles from each other at a time that it wasn't like, well, they were talking on the phone. No, like there was...
Sorry.
Oh, hey, Mallory.
Yeah.
There was no connection between these two. And like, they even kind of sued each other over who stole the idea. And it really was investigated. And no, they literally thought of it at the same time.
And that happened a few times in history with copyrights.
Yeah.
Which I find so fascinating. So I've heard like a kind of wooey idea of like the morphic field. I think I'm saying this right. The morphic field. Is that what I'm thinking?
Sure. I've never heard the word, but let's nod intelligently.
So it's like we sort of have a collective conscience.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I watched. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, that was it. My facial expressions. Like that was it.
No, what's really, really funny, I watched James Corden interview Neil deGrasse Tyson recently, and he said, he's like, there are people, and he was trying to not sound crazy. He was like, there are people out there saying that we all live in like a simulation, that we are all just like inside some kind of computer simulation or some kind of situation where this isn't real and it's all just part of a simulation. Is that true? And you could kind of see James Corden's like discomfort with the question, and the answer was awesome. And he goes, I wish that I had a good answer that could disprove that, but there isn't one. And he's like, there's a lot of sense to that. There's a lot of reason and math that supports that. And it
was real.
And exactly. And so then you start talking about this morphology, this, how is it that these things are introduced as if by injection at different points at the same time and at different points in relative space, but at the same time, relatively and seemingly spontaneously? It's fascinating.
Okay. Let me light a match and throw a fire onto a pile of gasoline you didn't know was there.
Hit me.
So many different ideas have also formed in different areas. Why? The patriarchy.
Okay. Damn it, Maggie. Okay.
Gender roles.
Okay.
Monogamy.
I'm not sure where this is going anymore.
Me neither. Why? Just putting it into the ether.
So you're saying, so it's really fascinating. It is remarkably fascinating that there are certain things, like you just mentioned, the patriarchy, monogamy, gender roles, that as little sense as they make to me, and they really do make no sense, it's fascinating. And I'm not saying what it sounds, some people have seemed to think I'm saying here. It's interesting that they seem to be so prolific at different, like, it's interesting that as ridiculous as they truly are, and I truly believe that, how long lasting and prolific they have been through more or less every, not all, but
then how can we say they're ridiculous?
I have limitations on things I'm allowed to think that you don't have, but and we both know that's true.
Hear me out. Okay. The wheel.
Okay.
Is it fair for us to say that the wheel is ridiculous when we still to this day are using some form of it?
5,000, 5,500 years later, yeah.
And it's still useful. It still helps us. It's helped us to grow as a culture, as a society.
The wheel begat gears, gears begat engineering, engineering begat science. Yes, absolutely.
So how is the patriarchy, gender roles, and monogamy any different? Why do we say it's ridiculous?
It's an interesting question. I would say because, thank you for walking me into this landmine, Maggie. No, I would say it's because lots of them aren't logically consistent. They are emotionally consistent. Man is territorial. That's mine. And that goes to the patriarchy. That goes to monogamy. That goes to gender roles. Man, testosterone, grunt, tends to be very territorial. And this they have shown that the higher level of testosterone, both men or women have, the more tendency to territorialism they have. So especially when you go back to eras that we were more physical activity tends to create more testosterone. We have societies that were heavily testosterone based, which means they're going to be more territorial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing I just said is logical. That's all hormonal and emotional. The reason it's nonsense is because now, for the first time in history, revisionist as all get out, we are looking at things with a more logical there is less, it's logically inconsistent. Now, I mean, I could jump into the whole concept of the neocortex versus the limbic system, but I'm not going to at this stage of the conversation. It's a matter of the society that we're looking at in the past does not represent nor resemble the society we live in now, and we are attempting to fit them together, and that's never going to work. That's my long answer. Now tell me I'm wrong. No, that's how this works.
I was really just putting it in the ether. Like I really hesitate to say that the patriarchy, monogamy, gender roles are all bad, because the reality is that societies throughout history that have tried to upend this, they don't exist anymore. So what is it about the patriarchy, monogamy, and gender roles, both together and separate? What is it that has made it, like, how is it so lasting? And what is it about them that has made for strong societies and cultures?
I 100% agree. I will say that I've mentioned it almost every time we talk, and I'm to this day so grateful that I had never read the book Sapiens until after I finished my book, because he makes half of the points I make just better. And had I read it earlier, I think it would have unduly influenced me getting to the end of the page on my own, me getting to the end of my thought. But having read my book and then read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. Yuval Noah Harari? Anyway, it's a great book. He goes into the nonsensicality, and he is a historian anthropologist guy. He goes into the, not necessarily the patriarchy per se, and not monogamy per se. I mean, he mentions both, but specifically in gender roles, and how that we can't, as anthropologists, really quite figure it out, because there's a lot of ways that it doesn't make sense. Especially and specifically when you took, like, the peacock is the pluming beautiful one, is the sex object. The peahen is very normal looking.
That's true. A lot of different animals.
In most animals, as a matter of fact, the ones that peacock, the ones that jut, the ones that have the men preen to so that the women will choose. In our society, it's both the same and different. In ours,
it's not.
Yeah, like I mean, I get how it's the same and different. And he talks about how like it's really easy to say, well, men were in control because men were the strong ones. But the general of the army is never the soldier in the army. Very rarely was the general in antiquity, not anymore, this is no longer true, but in antiquity, the general in the army did not come up from being a pikeman. That's not how that worked. So why is it, and there's a few Chinese dynasties where this is not the case, and there's definitely some Joan of Arc examples here, but a general being a female in a lot of ways makes way more sense. Yeah, let the foot soldiers be the men, but the women being in charge. Now, but throughout most of history, that hasn't been how that's been played out. There is, of course, standout examples. There are awesome standout examples.
To the rule, but they don't change the rule.
But they are. I mean, like I said, I don't come at me on the but what abouts. Yes, there's absolutely a dozen but what abouts. But yes, there's a dozen of them in 5,000-6,000 years of recorded history. We can name all of them. Like, and he gets into the multiple theories that have been proposed, whether it's the strength thing and he disproves it, or whether it's the testosterone thing that I mentioned earlier and he disproves it. He goes through all of the different potentials and then dismantles them, leaving me to say I'm a much less intelligent individual. I really don't know. It is I
mean, ultimately, I don't know either, but I think that this is kind of like the question of God. Like, neither does he. And he may be able to dismantle them using logic, but his logic may be based on a false premise. This
Absolutely.
Is about us and how we think about these concepts and how we think about history. We oftentimes base our reflections on a false premise and try to compare it to like present day. We all do it. It's
100%.
Yeah. So my focus, and this is probably why I'm not like an anthropologist or anything, is everyone's always like, I ask the question why. We all ask the question, but why? But why was it like this? My focus is more, did it work though? Not how did it work? And this is why it shouldn't have worked.
But not was it fair? I hate it's not fair. It's not equitable. I don't.
Did it work? But did it?
One of my favorite things, and this is, I'm so afraid to say this, but it's so true. And it is one of my favorite things, again, from the book Sapiens, was when he talks about how people need to understand that there is no such thing as human rights. That is a human construct that we have invented. And are they good? Yes. Are they righteous? Are they helpful to the fabric of society? Do they help us move better? Yes. Those are all good, but we have to understand that the concept is man-made. Mm-hmm. Humans have, we don't have, none of us have inherent rights. We have governmental rights, we have societal rights, but there's nothing inherently, there's no right to being alive.
Right. You're touching on why I don't like it when people say gender is a social construct or race is a social construct, as if it's a bad thing. Lots of things are a social construct.
Right. Absolutely.
Like
not stealing, raping, and pillaging are social constructs. I'm for that.
Construct.
What's that?
Fairness is a social construct.
Absolutely. Justice, fairness, liberty, all of it. None of these are inherent to the universe. They're all things that we invented. Now, what's interesting is, and I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure. I've talked about this recently with someone. It might be you. But the concept that common sense isn't common, and that's not because people are stupid. It's because there is almost no such thing as a common point of reference.
Right.
We can't. So whether it's, the author of Sapiens, Noah Harari, or me or you can be from the same church, same tribe, same street corner at the same time and still come from a drastically different point of reference, which when you change a point of reference, it changes a lot. And you can get there, you can get to a similar location, but the way you got there was from your own. So people are like, oh my gosh, common sense. There's no such thing. Everything is strained through individual perspective.
Right. So I just wanted to say real quick, I wasn't saying that gender and racism are okay.
Oh no, I don't think anyone thought that.
I'm not clarifying for you. I'm clarifying for our many viewers that I'm not trying to argue that, but I'm just saying that the logic, like basing the argument on it being a social construct, well, that unravels a lot of things that are a social construct.
And I will be super honest, like I can get into the cognition of it just because of my, but I will say, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. The gender norms and gender divisions, I see historic I understand kind of how those became. I do. If you take us back to a primitive thing, from a child rearing perspective, there are certain ways that would have to be divided out. I can see how those trickled down. I do not. What's that?
They don't make sense now.
Yeah, they don't make sense now, but I see how they got established.
Yeah, absolutely. They were logical. They were the logical thing to do. And I tell my kids this all the time. Sorry to interrupt, but I tell my kids all the time. We are one, like, sun. Oh crap! What is that? Sun flare. We are one nuclear holocaust away from the Stone Age and going right back to gender roles.
Right, and I mean. But yeah, if you imagine a deserted island, if you imagine Little House on the Prairie, if you imagine living in a cave, gender roles make a lot of sense real fast. I'm not saying I know that's not where we live anymore, but I see where they came culturally and societally. Right. I am being straight-faced, dead serious, maybe naive, that I don't understand racism to the level and depth that it is I understand culturalism and tribalism, and I understand that, the French and the English were killing each other for thousands of years, but I understand I'm going to beat up your soccer team for liking a different soccer team. I do get tribalism, but the true hatred, not the I'm better than you, but the true just animosity and hatred that we see on people of color and I don't understand where that came. And again, I recognize I'm being naive here. I don't see it though.
I have so many ideas about that. Like so many, I have so many ideas. Like tribalism, I think is where it came from. And that the enemy is the guy in the red jersey and you're wearing the blue jersey. I think that race was a way that we use it because we were so tight knit as groups in our evolution that it was easy to see that guy over there is the different guy. But there was also a level of, there was definitely a lot more intersectionalism in the
context you're using it. Could you define intersectionalism in this context?
I just mean like the mixing of the races, like people getting along, like us, in our culture and society. I'm probably using the wrong word, but
that's fine.
But like in the Roman Empire, there was so much more,
and that's my point.
Yeah, the Silk Road, this was, and there was a lot more inbreeding. I say inbreeding, but like interracial whatever than we like to say as well, than we really believe, understand as well. And I think it's actually evolutionary for the same reason that plants do it, that we look at a different race, especially as men and conquerors, and say,
absolutely,
let's breed with that.
And yeah, that's true.
And then,
but I mean, it is, and again, I am saying this from a point that I know that I am wrong / naive, but it's strange to me because if we as a group, if all of a sudden aliens, a humanoid alien from another planet came down that looked almost like us, but were green, them being truly knee-jerk, they make me uncomfortable because I don't know what that's like. I almost get that. Thank you, Brian. But we have been interacting, as you just said, intersectionally. The Silk Road, the Greek Empire,
the Roman Empire,
the Greek and Roman Empire, and the Mesopotamian. It covered everywhere from Spain to Egypt. These were not white people. People talk about Alexander the Great. He was Greek, right? But there is not it was all the Greek Empire. It was all Greece. It was all. There's 7 different countries, modern countries, to include Spain, that claim that Alexander the Great was from them.
And he married a Persian woman.
Right. And so it's fascinating to me that 5,000 years later, that this is a concept that is still so encoded. I don't get it. I really struggle with, I hear my friends, yourself included, talking about the treatment, and it's so confusing to me.
I think it's probably a mix of what Christendom ended up looking like, which, by the way, was not a white religion.
Also very true.
And what Islam began to look like in the Muslim conquest of Europe and invasion. And then it became dark versus white, and it became this whole thing, and interracial became a thing. And then the slave trade happened, the Atlantic slave trade, because slavery existed for a very long time before.
Sure. And it wasn't racially motivated. There was like in the Spartacus era, the Roman era, it was tribally motivated, and there were white on white slave trades. There were all
the word slave comes from Slavic.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I tell my kids all the time, like, you're slave stock 100%, because my husband is half Slavic. And nice. I'm like, your father's people literally are why they're called slaves. And of course, we have the fun Atlantic slave trade for us. So
yeah, and again, I'm not attempting to I'm not trying to belittle, demean, or ignore, like, oh, it's not even real, guys. No, it's totally real. I am just, you and I have talked a lot about the way I don't necessarily always read situations correctly, nor see the social constructs that other people do. Whole book about it. I don't get it.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, it fascinates and it saddens me, but it fascinates me. And I don't understand how, in that we have been interacting multiracially for 5,000-6,000 years, how this is still a thing.
I think that with the Black community, the Black diaspora, with the Atlantic slave trade, I think that it actually happened before racism really happened, for a few reasons. So one, I think that we had separated at that point to the point where most people weren't interacting with people of a different race. So if you were in England, you probably weren't interacting with Black folks. You probably were born and died and never knew that darker people, like whatever. But
like being raised in Utah.
Yeah. So. I think with the Atlantic slave trade, there came a point where they had to start dehumanizing them. They had to start saying, oh, Black folks, they're not very intelligent.
Right.
They're not very, they're more like cattle than people, like they definitely had to start with the propaganda. And I think the propaganda caught on and went a little crazy. This is the same reason why we have Asian. Well, I mean, obviously it's complex. There's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons we have so much Asian hate in our country is because of the effects of World War II and all of this other stuff. I mean, you and I grew up post Vietnam, but pre Desert Storm. And so
very much so.
Grew up in the shadow of anti-Asian sentiments, these joke ideas that we thought, even now it's kind of weird to think like, oh, actually that was racism. That's probably not true. And then we saw the same thing begin to happen to Middle Eastern populations in America, the demonizing of Middle Easterners to a much longer and more extreme extent. I think that's what happened to people of African descent, of sub-Saharan African descent.
Yeah.
And during slavery. But I mean, this is just an idea. Like, I know that other people have this idea. I'm not trying to claim it as my own.
No, of course.
I'm just saying, like, this is just one aspect that it could be that,
I guess my point here is the stickiness of the idea, because I all of a sudden can't think of it. My dad talks about a Big Mac being a nickel when he was a kid, and like, yeah, things change, old man. I hope he's not watching. But like, we are so culturally, again, we are so quick to ridicule the culture of our fathers and forefathers. Why is it we let the absolute worst traits of their culture be the things that are sticky? And there is so much that we gleefully put off of the culture of our parents, and we push away from it. But the things that we keep tend to be the most sticky and insidious things. And as a communicator and maker of propaganda, that confuses me because the stories. Why? I'm trying to think. Yeah.
You're responding to my facial expression. I'm confused that it confuses you. Like, honestly, I'm kind of confused that it confuses you.
Okay, explain that.
To me, the answer is so simple. Where do you get the most privilege? It behooves you as a white person to continue with racism against darker people. However,
I would disagree with that so wholeheartedly, but continue.
Okay. However, because of the way that our society is transforming, it now doesn't. Because now if you're a racist, now you're pushed out from the greater society. Now it's bad. But 100 years ago, your grandfather, great grandfather, it behooved him to keep that up, to keep the racism up.
Why?
Because then he was a shoo-in for success when more people couldn't have the same what's the word I'm looking for? Not abilities.
Power.
Power, but opportunities.
Okay. So you're an Aaron Sorkin fan, correct? Did you watch The West Wing at all?
Oh my gosh, I've only watched like season 1 of The West Wing. That's
okay. Well, first off, fix that. I've watched all of it, like, I don't know, more times than is probably healthy. There is an episode, it's season 3 or 4, where a congressman comes in to talk about getting a bill taken off the floor. Like, he doesn't want it voted on, and it's about gay rights. And the Bradley Whitford character, Josh Lyman is saying, like, you're gay to this congressman. He's like, yes, I am. He's like, you're a gay Republican. He's like, yes, I am. He's like, how? Like, how are you doing this? And his response I really like. He said, you guys like gun control. If every single Democrat joined the NRA and showed up to the next meeting and voted for gun control, that would be the way to do it. Now, again, there's so many logical fallacies in that. But my point is that the best place. So I had my nephew, he's 27 now. Oh my gosh, I think that's true. That's terrifying. When he was a junior or a senior, he decided that he was going to run for student body. And he was like, I need to get in with the cool kids, And my father, again, so I've already made fun of a couple of times, said, no, you don't. Go and say hello to everyone. Everyone that is sitting alone, go say hello to everyone that's by themselves. Go say hello to the chess club. Go say hello to the IV club. Go say hello to the people that are being ignored by everyone else. And he's like, okay, Grandpa, I'll try that. And he did. And he won by a landslide.
It's very Trumponian.
Yes. So Brian, he's gone now, which is sad. I've been meaning to. He asks this earlier. He says, I'll pull it up. He said, why is there a world where Trump is with Trump as president? And this is the answer. Mm-hmm. If my grandfather 100 years ago had gone out and been awesome, non-racist, uplifting to the underbelly, that was where the power was. But we the white people, we kept the stick and not the carrot. And that has never been in our self-interest at any point. And I can't figure out how no one else has seen that before. Yes, society is shifting on it now, but this isn't news. The stick, they've seen this in slaveholders back in the deep South. The people that were better and nicer had, again, I'm not saying slavery was in any way acceptable or good, but the stick has always been worse than the carrot.
They had more productive slaves.
Yes. Why was Thomas Jefferson so terrified or George Washington or they had power in population that they suppressed. And I can't figure out their end. And I don't think they had an end game. I think that they had a mental block. Again, this is all in the chapter we're actually talking about. They had power in population that they then put into paper was only 3/5 of what it should have been. And that makes absolutely no sense.
3/5 came about later.
3/5 is in the Constitution.
But I thought it was an amendment.
No, it's in the census part. Talks about it counted every free person and 3/5 of every other person.
I think that I was actually thinking pre-declaration, not pre-declaration, but pre the winning of the, almost said Civil War. Wow. Okay.
Revolution?
Yeah, the revolution. So, okay, here's the thing though. There was a lot more to it back then. Like the people who wanted to abolish slavery wanted to send African Americans, Black Americans back to Africa.
Nope. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot there. There was a lot of fear that there would be like a takeover, just like we have that fear now. Like a lot of racists have that fear now. Well, you're letting the blacks take over,
No, yeah, that's true. If you beat up a population and then let them out, they're not going to be grateful you let them out. Well, that's true.
But here's something interesting about Thomas Jefferson. He truly believed that we would create a new race, just like the Spaniards did with the indigenous peoples of Central and South America.
Yes.
He believed that we would intermingle with the indigenous people of North America and create a new race, just like happened there.
Which is strange.
Fascinating to me. That's fascinating. It makes you wonder, why didn't it happen?
I was about to say, I'm less fascinated that he thought that and more fascinated that it didn't. Like there are still, the mixture of the indigenous with the Spaniards to the current kind of the Aztec, so that central Mexico. I'm confused how that didn't happen. I don't know between the indigenous. Yeah,
I have a few thoughts, but yeah, like it is just so fascinating to me that didn't. I mean, I think that we were as horrific as the Spaniards were. The longevity of our horrificness was pretty bad. And I also think that
longevity of horrificness needs to be on a t-shirt, but
yeah, right under Star Spangled Awesome. Star Spangled Awesome.
Star Spangled Awesome, for the record, also an Aaron Sorkin line that I stole. But.
Yeah. But yeah, like I don't know, like there was a lot that we did by forced segregation too with the indigenous people.
And I get that, but my point is, again, if you think about what conscription is, and like let's take the Greek city-states. Conscription, they would go they went from city to city and said, you owe us 100 young men because we said so. You owe us a dozen young men. Because the one thing they understood is that pointy parts equal power. Like, I need more men on pike, and that equals power.
Okay, penises. Okay, go on.
You know what? Fine, let's use penises. But either way, pointy parts equals power, and that's and as crazy as that sounds, that's what the whole draft and conscription was. They would go from town to town all the way up through the Civil War and, frankly, World War II. No, Vietnam, and just say, I need more people on the battlefield. So we know that from Alexander the Great through Vietnam, people, leadership, men have understood bodies equal influence. How we got twisted, but not those bodies. Like, I don't understand how, in the world of I need more votes, I need more votes, I need more this, I need more that, I need more power, how I'm going to go be nice to the thousands of people that are getting beaten up, why I'm not going to activate this audience as opposed to suppress them with all. Activating some, as a storyteller and a propagandist, I will say that activating an audience so much easier than suppressing one.
Honestly, I think that they did. There's a few different examples. For example, the 3/5 thing came about because they were worried about it being used. And then like body count, not death. Yeah. And then you have the Civil War, where obviously the South did not want to let their slaves fight alongside them.
Sure.
But the North did. Even in the Revolutionary War, you had slaves joining the British side because Britain had already abolished slavery in Britain. Sure. And had promised them freedom.
Sure.
So there's like some levels of this. But I think the fear of them joining the wrong side, quote unquote, was greater than the benefit of them joining your side. And I think that's really what it came down to. By the way, when you were talking about conscription, I thought at first you meant, why were they taking male bodies and not female bodies? And
and for the record, I mean, sure, that too, but no, I mean, that again, in the eras of conscription, that made sense. They really were conscripting foot soldiers, and they were taking some degree of women for everything from nurses to other, conquest.
Yeah, but historically speaking, men have been disposable.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. I was watching a TikTok about that just the other day, that as one of the things that modern feminism is really, really showing, is that, smart men and strong men are good, that can provide, and, smart women and strong women are good, and beautiful women are good, but that nothing is more disposable than an average guy. Like, it's just, you're replaceable. You're not by everyone. Again, that's a completely different conversation, but it's fascinating.
What's that? The concept of the disposable male really fascinates me.
Yeah.
I think that you can't deny, and I know a lot of feminists try to push back on it, like, oh, that's what, the conservatives say, that's what MRA say. And I'm like, yeah, a broken clock is right twice a day. Like, honestly, the human male throughout history has been disposable. End of story.
Yeah.
End of story. That doesn't mean feminism is wrong or that gender roles are good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply stating a fact. Men have been disposable.
Yeah, no, the kind of, I think it's abused a little bit, but the phrase that gets used, that whether or not it's abused, I absolutely agree with it, is that only women, children, and animals are loved unconditionally. Men are only loved for what they can provide. Be it money, support, like they are loved by what they bring to the table, not by.
Let me actually comment on that. I know it's not necessarily what we're talking about, but this is something that drives me crazy. When you get women or feminists or whatever on that side saying, listen, women are objectified, and they are mistreated and men aren't. And I'm like, well, yes, let's take objectification. Women are objectified more than men, or if you look at it from this viewpoint.
Yeah, if you look at it sexual, yeah.
Goodness, then yes, but men are objectified more than women if you set a different premise.
Thank you for saying. If you define the problem differently, if you set the parameters differently, if you look at you can take the exact same paintbrushes and exact same paint and exact same colors and paint the picture very differently by setting the lines.
Sorry, this is a hilarious conversation because I just did a 3-hour-long podcast on Mormon stories, which is supposed to be dropping today or tomorrow, where I was like talking feminist stuff, and now I'm over here like, well, those feminists.
I don't know that anybody. I mean, I don't know of anyone that thinks you're playing both sides there. I think that it's just you and I in one of our very first conversations, like a year ago. It was not public; it was just you and me talking. I think you were saying how you and your husband, and I can't remember if it was your husband said it to you or you said it to your husband about me. It was like, Kirk's got to be careful making sense on the internet. You can't like.
It was me.
It was you. Like, you can't, sometimes your opponent is right. And the biggest problem we have right now, in general, not in specific, is when you'll see two people debating on Crossfire. It's not a show anymore, but like, you'll see two people debating and one of them will make a solid point and the other one will fight against it, just not to lose the point. You're like, this is no longer productive or useful.
Right. So one of the things that I used to look for when Trump gave his speeches, his like State of the Unions, was who would clap and when and what for. And I remember, and I think it was his last one, I can't remember exactly, but he was talking about how more women were employed. And the left refused to clap. And I'm like, you guys just look like freaking toddlers at this point, like throwing a fit. Like, if you can't concede where your opponent is right, then you kind of suck.
Take the win, man.
Yeah. Like, if you don't care that more women are employed and you're going to whine about how it's not, I shouldn't say whine, it's dismissive, because it's a valid argument. Like, it's a valid pushback that they weren't getting as much like high paying jobs and lucrative careers. but they were still being employed. But that I could argue that too, because that's a very, very snobbish thing to think. Because honestly, if you've been unemployed for years, that midnight shift at 7-Eleven looks real damn good. So I think
Absolutely.
it's a privilege to argue that point. But anyway, it's just if you are more focused on your team getting the win for like a greater good, then you're really only focused on your team. It's really about the ideology. It's not about caring about people.
I love that because, yeah, I love that.
Or didn't vote for Trump.
I love that, especially because it really ties this back into the chapter that we've been sort of talking about ish, is that why do we know of the Aztec ruins and the Incans and the Mayans and the Olmec, and we know about the Egyptians and we know about the aqueducts, and we can name all these great places that mankind has autographed the wall of the world's bathroom. We have seen, they are still there, but we don't know who did it. Like, outside of just vaguely without Googling it. But we know all these people, this list of people plus more from Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. And what I postulate is that it isn't the power, or it is the power, but it's that we're, again, like we're defining power wrong. Men specifically and historically judge power by the size of the empire, but empires are only as big as long as they last, and they can crumble as they do. But what the people on the list of great thinkers, from Charles Dodson to Machiavelli to Ayn Rand to Aristotle, what these people did was add to human thought. They didn't write their name on the earth. They didn't shoot something into the moon, to the moon. They didn't dive deep to the Mariana Trench. They didn't accomplish a thing. They didn't build a thing. What they did was contribute to thought. And that is actual power.
Power.
What's that?
Knowledge is power.
Well, yes, to be all glib about it and stuff.
Rocky, chip off the block.
Sorry. Mallory just said, I may not be smart enough for this conversation. But I am high enough.
I love you, Mallory.
I am not.
Kirk, why aren't we drinking?
Why aren't we drinking?
Oh my gosh, we're like 10 minutes, away from the end. But okay, so I did want to say something. Oh, I wanted to say something that kind of maybe throws a wrench in what you're saying. But
okay.
Maybe, I don't know. Let's try. So we're talking about people and what they contribute and everything. You know what I've always wondered? Why certain battles are bigger than others. Okay, let's take the 300. That a lot of stuff is stretched with that battle.
And that it's utter bullshit. That is propaganda written by someone like me just a long time ago.
Well, it's not utter bullshit. There was yes,
sure.
And no.
It happened.
The last stand was still a thing.
Sure. Yes.
That was still a thing. It was still pretty epic. It was still pretty dang. I mean, they still lost, but like it was still pretty like epic and still pretty. Right. So you have that, and then you have Normandy. You have these battles that are like, holy cow! You even have William the Conqueror and his uphill battle, but that he won.
Yeah.
And Flanders Field, which I always want to call Pelennor Field, but that's actually like Tolkien. Anyway, you know what? I've never understood why the hell no one knows about the Battle of Trafalgar.
Well, I mean, every Marine right now is cringing that you just said that.
Obviously,
like, what the hell do you mean no one knows? And that's true.
But no random person on the street mentioned the 300 and then mentioned Trafalgar.
Yeah.
I mean, epic battle.
Well, and one of my favorites is, so I'm from the DC area, not really, but I claim it. And nobody does stories and history better than the Mid-Atlantic. Truly. And I mean that. Nobody does it. And nobody does it worse than New England, which is weird because they have better stories. Nothing happened in the Mid-Atlantic. I mean, Gettysburg, sure. Jamestown, Yorktown, cool, they're here. But like way more happened in New England, but they tell shit stories. It's just, it's funny. If you go to Salem and they'll be like, they'll tell the stories. They tell them badly. They then tell you, oh, and by the way, None of it happened here in Salem. It all happened in Danvers, which was called Salem at the time, but you passed Danvers 15 miles ago. We're just in Salem now, which kept the name, but everything we just told you didn't happen here. Same thing, we talk about the Battle of Bunker Hill. Do not fire till you see the lights in their eyes. Okay, here are some problems. First off, we lost that battle. Second off, it didn't happen on Bunker Hill. It happened on Breeds Hill. And third, Breeds Hill is now in the middle of Boston Harbor. But there is still a monument to the Battle of Bunker Hill, which we lost and wasn't fought there. I don't understand people at all.
Joe brought a really great thing here.
Hold on, pulling it up. One of the aha moments about the U.S. Constitution for me was the First Amendment is all about free thought. That's a really good point. The right to express free thought was utmost to allow a society to progress. And second was be armed. But sorry, that's a different joke. Like, no, you're right. Absolutely. The very first thing they sought, so many myths we rely on. Love that, Joe.
We do rely on them, though. We do. No. And this is where you have to ask, does it work? Does it work? Historically, it works. Historically, our mythologies are incredibly important.
Absolutely. No. And again, I'm a storyteller. I completely agree. It's that's going to send me down a tangent, like a bad one. But back to, but I love this. We wrote the Constitution. Not personally, I wasn't there, but we write the Constitution. And when we decide that we're going to make the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, which contains 3 things, are all about there will not be thought control. You can gather, speak, and say whatever you want. And that was revolutionary for the time, but it's important as a part of our kind of cultural genetics. It's very of our mythology. I know that's a separate comment to it, but it's a part of who we are, of this. We will not be controlled, thought-wise, which is funny because then the first thing we all started doing was use that to control people with stories.
Well, we started controlling thought and expression and everything pretty quickly after we were formed. But yeah. Absolutely.
But so you were in the middle of, I want to kind of circle back because I don't know if you finished the point or not, but the knowledge is power. And I don't mean knowledge. Knowledge is power and thought is power is a very different thing from what I mean. Knowledge is power. Yes. If I know where something is, that's powerful. I can get there. If I know who's in charge, that's awesome. I can ask them the question. If I know, that's knowledge.
Right.
I mean that the true power in history has been to the people who changed thought, not knowledge. Not people who wrote down the facts. The historians are often forgotten, which is ironic. Not knowledge, thought. John Nash didn't invent anything. He just changed. He came up with a new way of processing information. That is what is powerful.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I was just wanting an excuse to sing Schoolhouse Rock. When I
yeah. Don't we all? Don't we all?
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. Critical thinking, it goes back to the wheel.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And to that same point, actually, I just thought of something kind of interesting nope, totally gone. It was critical thinking and then the wheel. And then it was in the ether again. Finding those, dang it, gone. Say something witty.
You have a male MacBook Air and I have a female MacBook Air.
How is that? What, based on what?
Yours is masculine looking and mine's pink.
Oh, have you painted yours pink or put a skin on it?
It's the gold one. It's pink.
It is. No
dress. It's pink.
It's conjunction junction. What's your function?
And hooking up railroads and trains or whatever.
Yep.
That's not the one I know. Honestly, conjunction junction always confused the crap out of me when I was young. But let me tell you, I can recite the preamble because of that song.
I cannot. I can neither recite the preamble nor do I know that song particularly.
Seriously?
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember Schoolhouse Rock. Certainly. I was more of a, I wasn't an after school special guy particularly. I was more of a Ninja Turtles.
Well, my mother was obsessed with it, so she bought them all on VHS, and I watched them over and over again. And then I have Schoolhouse Rocks, which are rock covers of Schoolhouse Rock songs.
Nice.
So I'm a big Schoolhouse Rock fan, which is dumb.
No, it's useful. One of the stories that kind of led to the book is not in the book because it doesn't directly relate, but a few years ago I was working for USCIS Immigration, and I was working as one of their communications specialists, and they gave me an assignment that took me a little over a year to do, which was to create an internal set of videos that would teach there's an additional task that certain people are given called a congressional liaison specialist. And that person's job is, if a congressman or a staffer calls immigration to say, hey, my constituent's waiting on a green card, what gives? There's every center, every city office has one person as the congressional liaison specialist. Their job is to deal with Congress and senators. That's their job. But the problem is that you didn't need really any background to have this. Often it was just someone with a college degree and an 8th grade civics education. So there really was a problem of these people didn't know what Congress did nor how bills became laws. And they didn't want to just throw Schoolhouse Rocks at them. So they asked me to make an 8-part series of Congress and You, and just help. I'm dead serious. That's what it was called. I didn't name it. Not mine.
Hey, humanists, it's Deb.
That is. Hey, yeah, we are actually we are just wrapping up here in the next few minutes, but stick around.
This is probably my favorite one thus far.
This has been a good one.
You have to watch it because Kirk defends the patriarchy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm joking.
That's so not what I did. But while we're on this, no. But anyway.
If anyone is me, honestly.
If anything, you were defending the patriarchy. So there I am, USCIS, and I'm making an 8-part series, as I said, Congress and You. And and so I asked for special permission. I'm working in Judiciary Square, and I asked if I can go spend a couple of days in the Capitol, and I could meet with some staffers and watch some hearings, and I could get a better understanding so that I could better communicate that to people who had never done it, because I needed to be able to do that. And they said, yes, I got special permission. I spent a couple of days in Congress and kind of wandering around. So on my last day, I have these 2 people that have been lent to me. One is a congressional chief of staff. He has spent 45 years as a chief of staff for like 8 different congressmen and senators. He is a lifelong staffer on the Hill. And the other one is a constitutional lawyer who works with Congress. And we're sitting there in the rotunda. And I said, okay, guys, here's what I need. They're like, what can we do for you? And we're standing there, and I have my notepad out and I'm listening. I said, look, I need to, in 8 minutes or less, teach people with an 8th grade civics education how a bill becomes a law. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to walk me through the process, and I'm going to stop you. I was like, I have a master's degree, and I grew up in DC. I am going to stop you every time you say a phrase that I don't know. So please talk as stupid to me as you can, because I need this to be super simple. How many sentences do you think they made before I had to stop them?
I think they got through half of the first one.
They did not make it through a sentence, not one.
Yeah.
We talked for 3.5 hours, and in 3.5 hours, 2 men, both of them JDs, both of them time on the Hill, both of them so intelligent, not one sentence could they say without using a phrase that a common educated DC military guy, I had no idea what they were talking about.
But the thing is if you don't know something well enough to explain it to a child, you don't know it well enough.
I super duper agree. It's astoundingly true, as a matter of fact. Astounding. But it's so interesting. Right now I'm working on a piece that I should be working on here in a few minutes, actually. But I'm working on a piece for a military client. And the number of times I've had to ask them, I was like, my 2 questions. We've gotten to a point where my client literally hears me say the phrase, I've got 2 questions. And everyone who's met with me or worked with me starts laughing because they know where it's going. And I go, okay, here's my 2. And so someone will be like, here's what we're doing. Hey, thanks, Joe.
Oh, Java Joe talk. Okay. Okay.
And I would say to them, I would say that, anyone who's worked with me would be on the call, and then someone new would be on the call and be like, okay, Kirk, here's what we need, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay, great. Sounds wonderful. I've got 2 questions. And everyone on the call will start laughing because they know what's about to happen. Because it's hysterical. The 2 questions that I ask everyone, every client I've ever had in my career, I go, cool. Who are you talking to? And what do you want them to do? And it's amazing. From generals to senators to CEOs, people that make millions of dollars a year absolutely crumble at the concept of who is my audience and what do I want from them. That should be the first thing you think of. Like, my constituents, I want to get reelected. Like, that should be super simple. But these men, brilliant. I am talking to people with an 8th grade education, and I want them to understand what you do for a living. Could not do it. They couldn't explain it in terms that didn't completely alienate a 29 at that point. No, yeah, like 30-year-old master degree. They couldn't do it. And I was, who are we all circling back to? The people we remember are the ones who can explain things to us in ways that change our mind. The people we remember, the people we follow, the people we rally behind are the ones that change our mind. And you can't do that from your perspective. You have to do it from your audience's perspective. You have to do it from theirs. Anytime you try to talk at someone, down at someone, mansplain, or otherwise, when you talk from your high tower, nobody will listen. You can build the biggest pyramid in the world and no one will remember your name. But if you change the way people think by Socratically bringing it to their level, no one will forget you. And that's the power of thought. That's what stories do. They bring information to your audience and they change minds. And that is why we remember Aristotle. That's kind of my stump speech.
You're wrong. Let me explain why.
Okay. I'm here for it. I know you haven't finished my book yet, but the last chapter literally starts with everything in this book is wrong. That is the first line of the last chapter.
So I think you're actually right when it comes to the bougie side of things. I think you're right when it comes to the highly educated, the wealthy, the classical education side, speaking specifically of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. But the reason why everyone else remembers them is because those people want you to.
So why does...
It's their stories that they have chosen to push, to perpetuate. Like, honestly,
the people I interviewed, though, involved both. I interviewed academics that had no idea what those 3.
I'm saying that when it comes to people like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, you truly don't really know them unless you've studied them. Sure. Right? This is the point you were making. The reason why the masses love them is because they sound smart. Because we have been told all of our lives by society that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are super smart guys that we should like.
I'll buy that.
It's just like sriracha. It's a great thing we should like. And so that's why everyone knows sriracha's name.
So it's just so we're clear, like, I liked sriracha till it got popular.
Hipster, as if those glasses weren't doing it for you enough.
No, I actually like to say that I'm the anti-hipster, which is to say I only like things when they're no longer cool. But sriracha, I lived in a Hmong neighborhood in the early 2000s, and I'd never heard of sriracha before, and I was living in a Hmong community, and I called it cock sauce because it had a rooster on the front, and I didn't know how to read anything else on it.
Side note, I'm not a doctor, but if your cock sauce is anything like sriracha, you go to a doctor. immediately.
My appointment's next week. Anyway, so like, and I liked it. And then it became so hipster-tastical. The pizza place I go to has a sauce called sriracha, which is sriracha and ranch, which is vile. I'm done. I'm done with the.
I know when I go to the grocery store, when I go to Walmart, there's so many sriracha flavor, sriracha mayo, sriracha, and I'm just like,
no,
I never liked it. I never liked it.
Okay. Anyway, so this has been chapter 2 of The Very Best Bad Idea, which again, we talked about the chapter of the 90 minutes. We spent like 10 minutes talking about the book.
Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates like a lot. All right,
I understand, but very little. You know, I was in a live with Becca right before coming on. She's like, "What's the podcast you do with Maggie?" And I was like, "Well, we're going to start with some philosophy and history, but then we're going to devolve into whatever's interesting."
Yeah, and Thomas Jefferson will make an appearance.
You know what? For the record, he did. I did mention him earlier, so.
Back, yeah.
It counts. Every single episode has to talk about him. But we will be back next Tuesday from 9 to 10:30 Eastern or 6 to 7:30 Pacific, depending on which of us, which of our times you want to be off. But this is like my favorite podcast of the week. And again, I do a bunch of them. Oh yeah. So Debbie, yes, we're doing chapter by chapter. What? We're doing chapter by chapter. We've done the introduction, chapter 1, and this week was chapter 2. Next week, we'll be discussing chapter 3, which is called Extra Bacon, Hold the Grease. Grease spelled like the country because I'm punny.
And I don't like bacon. So I just want to put that out there.
I'm sorry. You don't like the person bacon or you don't like the food bacon? One of those is acceptable.
I don't like the food bacon.
What the heck is wrong with you?
I don't like bacon. I like turkey bacon, but
what the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah. I wanted to get this out now because I know that it'll come up next week. So I just wanted you to be prepared.
Yeah, that's going to come out next week. Like, why? It's like God's food.
Even just smelling it cooking makes me sick.
Hey, Debbie, what are you doing next Tuesday? Want to be a co-host of a show about my book? There's only one qualification. Yeah, chapter 3 next week, Extra Bacon, Hold the Grease. It is not talking about bacon, the substance. It is talking about bacon, the individual. It's Thomas Bacon. No, John, no. Why can I not remember his name all of a sudden? Remember. Right? Francis Bacon. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. Sir Francis Bacon. Thank you. Sir Francis Bacon and how he was the first person to change the schools of thought. He changed the way we thought after Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato kind of established them. Thousands of years later, Francis Bacon came along and invented the scientific method. Yes. Thank you, Debbie. It is, in fact, Francis. We just.
Fun fact name, but with an E
But yes. So yeah, I mean, pick up a book. For you, where does she live? You live in Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is available on Amazon.au. It's available Amazon everywhere in the world. If you buy it from my website, I can get it to, but I have found that the shipping, I found this out because someone wanted a signed copy. The shipping to Australia is more expensive than the book. Significantly more. It's insane. What's that?
You get the audiobook.
Oh yeah. Oh, you already have it. That's right. You had mentioned that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, if you want to join in again, it's 9:30. Sorry, it's 9 to 10:30 Eastern time. And then Maggie's is 6 to 7:30. I'm not sure where you are on that.
No, where is that? And it's tomorrow.
I know it's tomorrow. It's like tomorrow evening.
Yeah, it's like 2 p.m. Australian time. I don't know.
Something
so Northern Hemisphere centric here.
Yeah.
I'm so used to it dealing with Americans.
I know. Stupid Americans. Awesome. So, but yeah, no, come join us next week. We will be here both on YouTube and on my Facebook channel. Leave your comments on either on things you're liking and not liking. And if you have any extra comments, we'd love to. I also can have extra people on this. I can host up to 10 people. So if anyone ever wanted to join in the conversation, I can throw them up on screen. We can have them call in. Wednesday, 11 a.m. Oh, okay.
close.
So basically it's 12 hours ahead of me because it's almost 11 p.m. here. So perfect. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week. Awesome. See you, Debbie.